Elijah Hayes, a wisp of a boy just 17 years old, lived as if shrouded in perpetual twilight. His world, confined to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, revolved around charcoal sketches and whispered melodies hummed into his phone. Social interaction was a foreign language, spoken with awkward pauses and averted gazes. He excelled at art, finding solace in capturing the city's hidden beauty on paper, but struggled to connect with the bustling energy of New York. The keywords, thrilling story and journey of discovery, were concepts that existed only within the pages of his graphic novels, light years from his own reality. That reality shifted, irrevocably, on a cold March evening in 2025. His phone buzzed, not with the usual reminder for a piano lesson, but with a text from his estranged mother. "Serena, meet me at the corner of 72nd and Central Park West. 7 p.m., don't be late." Serena had been a ghost in his life, a whirlwind of fleeting visits and broken promises. Suspicion, not excitement, tightened its grip on Elijah's chest. This felt like an unsolved mystery about to unfold. Promptly at 7, a black SUV purred to a halt. A figure emerged, cloaked in shadow. Not Serena, but a woman in a tailored suit, her expression carefully neutral. "Elijah Hayes?" she asked, her voice crisp and professional. "I have a delivery for you." The back door opened, revealing not a package, but a creature of immense power and grace. A Belgian Malinois, barely a year old, sat patiently, his intelligent amber eyes fixed on Elijah. The dog's dark mask accentuated a powerful jaw and intelligent gaze that seemed to bore into Elijah's soul. This dog had a presence. The dog was clearly ready for anything. "His name is Apollo," the woman stated, handing Elijah a thick file. "He's yours. He's a highly trained dog. You will be responsible for it." The woman swiftly returned to the SUV, leaving Elijah standing on the sidewalk, grappling with the leash of a living, breathing mystery. Apollo tilted his head, nudging Elijah's hand with his wet nose. It was a hesitant invitation, a silent plea for connection. In that shared moment, something shifted within Elijah's guarded heart. Responsibility, a concept previously as alien as Serena's affection, began to take root. He had a role now. This animal needed him, and he has a role for it. This was no longer just a dog. Apollo was a gift of sorts, and had to be handled correctly. The cold New York air seemed a little warmer, the city noise a little less deafening. As Elijah looked into Apollo's eyes, a new chapter in his thrilling story was just beginning. Apollo would be part of this, and the adventure was all his. The following afternoon, Elijah ventured out with Apollo. The vast expanse of Central Park felt both liberating and daunting. Apollo, surprisingly well-behaved for such a powerful animal, trotted calmly beside him, the leash held loosely in Elijah's hand. The keywords "thrilling story" were no longer just words in books. Each rustle of leaves, each passing face, now held a tinge of the unknown. This was a journey of discovery into a world he hadn't known existed. Apollo seemed to sense Elijah's unease, nudging his hand occasionally, a silent reassurance. They walked in comfortable silence, the urban landscape fading into a background hum as Apollo sniffed at trees and greeted fellow dog walkers with polite tail wags. Elijah started to feel a sense of belonging, a connection to the park and its inhabitants he hadn't experienced before. Their peaceful stroll was shattered by the screech of tires. A police cruiser, black and imposing, swerved to a halt in front of them, blocking their path. Officer Derek Harding, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with disapproval, stepped out. His gaze, cold and assessing, fixed on Elijah. This felt like an unsolved mystery lurking in the shadows of the precinct. "Hold it right there, kid," Harding barked, his voice rough around the edges. "That your dog?" Elijah, startled, managed a hesitant, "Yes, sir." Harding's eyes narrowed, focusing on Apollo. "Expensive breed for a kid like you. Where'd you get it?" The question, seemingly innocuous, carried an undercurrent of suspicion that prickled Elijah's skin. He was a gift," Elijah stammered, clutching the leash tighter. The thrill of the walk had vanished, replaced by a knot of anxiety in his stomach. Harding smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. "A gift, huh? From who? Santa Claus?" He took a step closer, invading Elijah's personal space. Let's see some ID, son, and proof of ownership for that animal. Elijah fumbled for his wallet, his hands trembling. The friendly park had suddenly become a hostile territory, the laughter of children replaced by the heavy weight of Harding's gaze. This felt like more than just a routine check. It felt like an unwarranted accusation, a prejudgment based on nothing more than appearance. I don't have the papers on me," Elijah said, his voice barely a whisper. Harding's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Then I'm going to have to impound the dog until you can prove it's yours. And you're coming with me for questioning. Don't try anything stupid." He was setting up an unjustified charge based on profiling. The peaceful day was gone, and Elijah was about to learn the hard truth. Some journeys of discovery lead not to excitement and joy, but to the cold, harsh reality of prejudice and power. The key words and thrill he was looking for were not exciting anymore. The air crackled with tension. Apollo, sensing Elijah's fear, shifted his stance, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Officer Harding, interpreting this natural protective instinct as aggression, took a step back, his hand instinctively moving towards his holster. "Keep that dog away from me," he yelled, his voice laced with a barely concealed tremor. "He's just protective, sir," Elijah pleaded, tugging on the leash. "He doesn't mean any harm." Harding's face contorted in a mixture of fear and rage. "I said, keep him back. I'm trained to deal with dangerous animals. Don't make me use force." The thrilling story that was building turned horrific. Elijah, desperate to de-escalate the situation, tried to demonstrate Apollo's obedience. "Apollo, sit, stay!" The dog, confused by Elijah's panic and Harding's threatening posture, hesitated for a moment. The pause, however brief, sealed Apollo's fate. Harding, his eyes wide with perceived danger, drew his weapon. The metallic click echoed through the park, silencing the bird song and the distant city hum. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Elijah's breath hitched. Apollo, reacting to the sudden movement, barked sharply, a sound that was immediately swallowed by the deafening roar of the gunshot. The bullet found its mark. Apollo crumpled to the ground, a whimper escaping his lips. A dark stain blossomed on his fur, spreading like a macabre flower. Elijah watched in horror, his mind unable to process the swift, brutal reality. This moment would be a defining part of this journey of discovery through grief. Harding, his chest heaving, lowered his gun, his face a mask of justification. "I warned you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. The unsolved mystery was complete now. Elijah knelt beside Apollo, his hands frantically searching for a pulse. Nothing. Apollo's amber eyes, once so full of life and intelligence, were now glazed over, vacant. The bond they had formed in such a short time, the promise of companionship and loyalty, was extinguished in an instant. A scream, raw and primal, tore from Elijah's throat. The park, once a place of solace, was now a scene of unimaginable loss. As sirens wailed in the distance, Elijah cradled Apollo's lifeless body, the weight of his grief as heavy as the city itself. The sound of the gun would forever echo in his ears, a constant reminder of the day innocence died in Central Park. The warmth was over. A tragedy has begun. Handcuffs, cold and unforgiving, bit into Elijah's wrists. The back of the police cruiser smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, a sterile scent that did nothing to mask the growing nausea churning in his stomach. Each bump in the road felt like a fresh wound, a physical manifestation of the injustice he was enduring. This wasn't the thrilling story he had imagined. It was a nightmare unfolding in real time. Harding, his face impassive, drove in silence. Elijah could only stare out the window, the familiar landmarks of his city blurring into an indistinct smear of light and shadow. Central Park, once a haven, was now a crime scene etched forever in his memory. The image of Apollo, lying motionless on the ground, replayed relentlessly in his mind, each loop more agonizing than the last. At the precinct, Elijah was processed with cold efficiency. His belongings were confiscated, his fingerprints were taken, and he was led to a holding cell, a small sterile room with a metal bench and a flickering fluorescent light. The keyword's journey of discovery now led down a path of disillusionment and fear. The cell door clanged shut, the sound echoing like a death knell. Elijah was alone, the weight of his situation crushing him. He was 17 years old, grieving the loss of a friend, and now, imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. The unsolved mystery wasn't who killed Apollo, but why this was happening to him. The city outside hummed with life, oblivious to the injustice unfolding within these cold concrete walls. He sat on the bench, his head in his hands, tears streaming down his face. The sterile environment offered no comfort, no solace. He was just a kid, lost in a system designed to protect and serve, but which had instead turned against him with brutal force. The irony was not lost on him, and he was just discovering this dark side of American life. The experience was traumatic, shattering his innocence and leaving him with a profound sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about Apollo anymore. It was about the abuse of power, the casual disregard for human life, and the inherent biases lurking beneath the surface of society. As he sat there, shivering in the cold cell, Elijah knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same. This experience would leave long-lasting scars. The thrilling story had turned into a crime story, and now he was the protagonist. The phone rang at 2:00 a.m. The shrill sound slicing through the darkness of Gabriel Hayes's Upper East Side apartment. He knew, even before answering, that it was bad news. One look at the caller ID, the 19th precinct, confirmed his dread. He was living a thrilling story he would never choose. "Hayes," he answered, his voice tight with controlled apprehension. The officer on the other end spoke in clipped, professional tones, relaying the details of Elijah's arrest. Each word felt like a physical blow. Gabriel, a seasoned prosecutor known for his unwavering commitment to justice, listened in stunned silence. His son, Elijah, arrested? It was incomprehensible. "And the dog?" "Wug?" Gabriel asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Deceased, sir. Shot by Officer Harding during the incident." A cold fury surged through Gabriel, eclipsing the initial shock. He was a man of logic and reason, but the thought of his sensitive, artistic son facing such brutal violence ignited a primal rage within him. The unsolved mystery was not the crime, but the blatant injustice. This wasn't simply a mistake. It was an act born of prejudice and fueled by abuse of power. "I'm on my way," Gabriel stated, his voice firm, the steel in his tone unmistakable. He arrived at the precinct to find Elijah withdrawn and traumatized, his eyes hollow with grief and disbelief. The sight of his son looking so vulnerable and lost was a punch to Gabriel's gut. He had always strived to shield Elijah from the darkness of the world. But now, that darkness had found its way into their lives with devastating force. Gabriel knew this crime story needed to be exposed. As he filled out the necessary paperwork, Gabriel made a silent vow. He would use every resource at his disposal, every ounce of his legal acumen, to clear Elijah's name and bring justice for Apollo. The system he had dedicated his life to upholding had failed his son, and he would not rest until those responsible were held accountable. Later, as he drove Elijah home, Gabriel looked at his son. He knew this case would challenge him, forcing him to confront the inherent flaws within the very system he served. But as a father, and as a man of justice, he had no other choice. He had to find a new journey of discovery to clear his son's name. "I promise you, Elijah," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I will get you through this. I will find the truth." And to Harding, he would make sure justice was served. And to Harding, he would make sure justice was served. Gabriel Hayes, armed with his sharp legal mind and a father's burning resolve, knew the key to clearing Elijah's name lay in the bodycam footage. Officer Harding, like all NYPD officers, was mandated to wear a body-worn camera during patrols. That footage, Gabriel believed, held the irrefutable truth of what transpired in Central Park. The journey was a thrilling story he needed to get access to. His initial requests for the footage were met with stonewalling and bureaucratic delays. The precinct, under Captain Reynolds' command, cited ongoing investigations and privacy concerns. Gabriel, however, wouldn't be deterred. He knew the system. He had worked within it for years. He was ready to push back as hard as necessary. Gabriel was discovering more about the journey. He filed a formal subpoena, leveraging his position as a prosecutor to demand immediate access to the bodycam footage. Still, resistance persisted. Reynolds, while outwardly cooperative, seemed hesitant, her words carefully chosen, her eyes betraying a hidden conflict. He wondered about the unsolved mystery that the bodycam would expose. "Gabriel, I understand your concerns," Reynolds said during a tense meeting in her office, the faint hum of the city filtering through the closed windows. But we have protocols to follow. Releasing the footage prematurely could compromise the investigation. Compromise the investigation. Olivia? Gabriel countered, his voice laced with controlled frustration. Or protect a rogue officer who shot an innocent dog and wrongfully arrested a minor? Which is it? The air in the room thickened. Reynolds' carefully constructed facade cracked for a moment, revealing the weight of the difficult position she was in. The real crime story was being prevented. She was protecting bad police behavior. Gabriel pressed harder, outlining the potential for a civil rights lawsuit, the damage to the department's reputation, and the ethical imperative to transparency. Finally, Reynolds relented, albeit reluctantly. I'll authorize a review of the footage, she conceded, but I can't guarantee immediate release. It has to go through channels. Days turned into agonizing weeks. Gabriel, fueled by sleepless nights and endless cups of coffee, prepared his case, gathering witness statements and consulting with civil rights attorneys. The thrilling story in his head continued as he prepared a case to reveal the injustices. He was determined to expose the truth, no matter how deeply buried, and to hold Officer Harding accountable for his actions. Finally, a call came from Reynolds. Gabriel, the footage is ready for review. Come to the precinct tomorrow morning. As he hung up the phone, Gabriel felt a surge of hope mixed with trepidation. He knew that the truth was on the verge of being revealed, but he also knew that the fight was far from over. Whatever was on that body cam would begin a new beginning for all. The interrogation room was stark, the harsh fluorescent light highlighting the lines of fatigue etched on Officer Derek Harding's face. He sat across from Sergeant Miller, a seasoned investigator known for his calm demeanor and relentless questioning. The thrilling story had turned into a moment of truth and justice needed to be served. Gabriel knew what the body cam had. Harding initially maintained his composure, reciting the official version of events with practiced ease. He claimed that Elijah was acting suspiciously, that Apollo was an aggressive animal, and that he feared for his safety. He was just doing his job, protecting the public from a potential threat. This seemed to be a rehearsed script. The body cam footage tells a different story. Officer Harding, Miller stated, his voice even but firm. It shows Mr. Hayes clearly attempting to comply with your instructions. It shows Apollo responding to commands. It shows you escalating the situation unnecessarily. The jig was up, and the unsolved mystery had been solved. Harding's facade began to crack. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting nervously around the room. The camera doesn't show everything, he stammered. It doesn't show the tension, the way the kid was acting. That dog was trouble. I could feel it. Miller leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Feel it, officer? Is that how you justify shooting an animal? Acting on a feeling? The sergeant called it what it was, police abuse. Harding was trying to craft a crime story to get out of what had happened. As the interrogation wore on, Harding's carefully constructed narrative unraveled. He started to reveal the underlying currents that fueled his actions. The mounting pressure from his superiors to increase arrests, the simmering resentment towards privileged kids like Elijah, and the personal demons that haunted him. He spoke of his own struggles, the long hours, the low pay, the constant exposure to violence and despair. He talked about his crumbling marriage, his financial worries, and the feeling that he was failing both as a police officer and as a man. His true colors were now starting to show to everyone. I just wanted to keep things under control, Harding said, his voice laced with a mixture of defensiveness and self-pity. I saw that dog, that kid, and it felt like everything was about to spiral out of control. I panicked. The thrilling story turned into a sad story for Officer Harding, who revealed more and more. Miller remained silent, allowing Harding to expose himself, to reveal the flaws and biases that had led him to make such a tragic decision. Harding's actions had a background. The question was, what justice would come of all this? By the end of the interrogation, Harding was a broken man, stripped bare of his authority and pride. He had tried to justify his actions, but in doing so, he had only revealed the deep-seated prejudices and personal failings that had driven him to make such a terrible mistake. The truth was revealed as the pressure became more and more. He has dug his own hole. Captain Olivia Reynolds stared at the blinking cursor on her computer screen. The bodycam footage of the Central Park shooting replaying in her mind for the 100th time. The thrilling story had turned into a personal moral dilemma and justice needed to be served. She was walking on the thin ice of what the right thing to do was. The evidence was undeniable. Officer Harding had acted rashly, fueled by prejudice and a dangerous misinterpretation of events. But Harding was one of her own, a veteran officer with years of service, a man she had personally mentored and trusted. To throw him to the wolves felt like a betrayal of the oath she had sworn to protect her officers. She felt like she was the main character in an unsolved mystery, not knowing which path was the right one. Yet, to protect Harding would be a betrayal of something far greater. Her duty to the truth, to the community she served, and to the very principles of justice she had dedicated her life to upholding. This part of the journey of discovery turned out to be one about her own self-discover. Was she the right person to lead a troop of police officers? The pressure from above was immense. The department, already under scrutiny for recent incidents of police misconduct, wanted the matter handled swiftly and quietly. Reynolds knew that any misstep could ignite a public relations firestorm and further erode the trust between the police and the community. This crime story had the chance to ignite the fury of New Yorkers if not handled correctly. She thought of Elijah Hayes, a young man whose life had been irrevocably shattered by Harding's actions. His face, itched with grief and disbelief, haunted her. He just needed someone to come alongside him. She wondered who she was, and the purpose of her job. Reynolds also considered her own career. To side with Elijah would mean facing the wrath of the police union, risking her reputation, and potentially jeopardizing her future within the department. She felt trapped between a rock and a hard place, her conscience warring with her ambition. Her power had a cost to it, and she was feeling it for the first time. Days turned into sleepless nights. Reynolds found herself pacing her office, wrestling with the impossible choice before her. She felt like she was watching a thrilling story of someone else and not her own story. She spoke with her mentors, her colleagues, even her therapist, seeking guidance but finding only conflicting opinions and platitudes. What was the right thing to do? Finally, Reynolds came to a decision. She realized that true leadership wasn't about protecting her own, but about upholding the law. Even when it was difficult, even when it was painful. The department had a code. It had to follow it, with her or not. She would recommend that Harding be charged. She would tell the truth. The decision was made. The steps of the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse transformed into a vibrant tapestry of protest. Banners emblazoned with "Justice for Apollo" and "Accountability" now rippled in the March wind. The thrilling story of injustice had ignited a firestorm, and now the community was rising in solidarity. Elijah, shielded by his father and a phalanx of supporters, stood on the periphery, his heart pounding in his chest. The journey of discovery had taken him to this moment and changed his life. He was no longer just a grieving teenager. He was a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for a community yearning for justice. All the protesters were now a part of the movement. The crowd, a diverse mosaic of New Yorkers, chanted slogans, sang freedom songs, and shared stories of their own encounters with police misconduct. Civil rights activists, community leaders, and ordinary citizens united in their outrage over Apollo's death and Elijah's wrongful arrest. He was now discovering more people who understood him. The hashtags started trending on Twitter and Instagram. Television cameras captured the scene, broadcasting the raw emotion and unwavering determination to a city and a nation grappling with issues of racial bias and police brutality. The local news played it again, showing the body cam footage. Elijah, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He had been so consumed by grief and despair that he had lost sight of the power of community, the strength of collective action. The thrilling story was no longer just about the injustice, but about fighting back to create a justice system. He saw signs with Apollo's picture and his own drawing of him. He saw the faces of people he had never met, their eyes filled with compassion and a shared commitment to justice. He was discovering a purpose in his life. "They're here for you, Elijah," his father said, his voice thick with emotion. "They believe in you. They believe in justice." He now was a part of the crime story by bringing light to the dark issues. As the chants grew louder, Elijah stepped forward, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. He felt a surge of energy, a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer alone. He was part of something bigger, something powerful. The thrilling story still had an end to write. He promised Apollo he would follow through. The courtroom was hushed, thick with anticipation. Elijah sat rigidly beside his father, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. The thrilling story had reached its climax, but the ending remained uncertain. He was trusting the system, trusting that justice would win and that he would be cleared of it all. He had to trust in the process. After weeks of testimony and legal wrangling, the jury had reached a verdict. The weight of their decision hung heavy in the air, a palpable force that pressed down on everyone in the room. Gabriel squeezed his son's shoulder, a silent gesture of support. There was so much at stake for all in Crime Story. The jury foreperson, a middle-aged woman with weary eyes, rose to her feet. In the matter of the People versus Derek Harding, we the jury find the defendant. She paused, the silence stretching into an eternity. Not guilty of manslaughter. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Elijah's world tilted on its axis. Not guilty? How could this be? The evidence was overwhelming, the bodycam footage undeniable. His hopes of a reasonable outcome just disappeared. The jury foreperson continued, her voice flat and emotionless. However, we find the defendant guilty of reckless endangerment, a lesser charge, a slap on the wrist. The journey of discovery had led to a dead end. The verdict was woefully insufficient, a blatant disregard for the value of Apollo's life and the trauma inflicted on Elijah. The feeling was that he wanted to leave and run away from it all. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Protesters surged forward, their chants of justice for Apollo turning into cries of outrage. Gabriel, his face a mask of fury, struggled to maintain his composure. He had seen injustices before, but this felt deeply personal, a betrayal of the trust he had placed in the legal system. The injustice was so clear to him. Elijah sat numbly, his mind reeling. The system had failed him. The thrilling story was anything but. The unsolved mystery remained unsolved. The American justice system was something he no longer felt safe around. It would now need to change. He looked around at the faces of his supporters, their expressions mirroring his own disappointment and disbelief. The promise of justice had been shattered, leaving behind a bitter residue of disillusionment. And as he walked out of the courtroom, the jeers and insults of Officer Harding's few supporters echoing around him, Elijah knew that this was far from over. This story was not done being written. Weeks blurred into months. The verdict hung over Elijah like a shroud, suffocating his spirit and dimming his creative spark. The thrilling story he once sought now felt like a cruel joke. The charcoal sketches remained unfinished, the whispered melodies unsung. He struggled to leave his apartment, haunted by the memory of Apollo and the injustice that had robbed him of his peace. He needed to find a way to honor the memory of Apollo. His father, burdened by his own sense of failure, watched helplessly as Elijah retreated further into himself. The weight of the crime story had been a lot for both of them. Gabriel encouraged his son to seek therapy, to find healthy ways to process his grief and anger. But Elijah resisted, clinging to his pain as if it were the last tangible connection to Apollo. He still missed his friend. One spring morning, Elijah found himself drawn back to Central Park. He hadn't been there since that fateful day. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the memory of death that lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling of despair. He walked towards the spot where Apollo had fallen. He brought an old dog tag of Apollo and placed it where he shot. His goal for the day was just to honor the life of Apollo. He sat down on a bench, overlooking the expanse of green. As he watched the other dogs frolicking with their owners, a wave of sadness washed over him. He wished Apollo was there with him. "I miss you, bud. I miss you, bud." Then, he saw a group of young people gathering nearby, carrying signs and wearing shirts with Apollo's image. They were members of a newly formed animal rights organization, inspired by Elijah's story to fight against police brutality and advocate for stricter regulations on the use of force. Intrigued, Elijah approached them. They recognized him immediately, their faces lighting up with admiration and gratitude. "Elijah, we're so sorry for what happened," said a young woman with fiery red hair. "We're fighting in Apollo's memory. We won't let his death be in vain." The thrilling story was still being written, and the message was still as important as ever. The young activist asked him to be the keynote speaker at the next protest. That was a call to action, an affirmation that Apollo's life had meaning, that his death had sparked a movement for change. Inspired by their passion and commitment, a flicker of hope ignited within Elijah. He started attending meetings, sharing his story, and lending his artistic talent to the cause. He designed logos, created posters, and spoke at rallies, his voice growing stronger with each passing day. The journey of discovery had become a journey of activism, a fight for justice on a grander scale. It was no longer about him. He still grieved for Apollo. The pain of his loss would never fully disappear, but he had found a way to channel his grief into something positive, something meaningful. He realized that true honor wasn't about dwelling in the past, but about building a better future. And as he stood among his fellow activists, chanting for justice, Elijah knew that Apollo's spirit lived on, not just in his memory, but in the fight for a more just and compassionate world. His memory had to live on. The world could be so cruel, and that was a lesson that everyone needed to learn. The journey of Elijah and Apollo offers potent lessons for navigating life's inevitable storms. First, transform grief into purpose. Elijah channeled his pain into activism, demonstrating that even the most profound losses can fuel positive change. Consider, what cause ignites your passion when facing adversity? Second, recognize systemic biases. This crime story highlights that injustice often stems from deeply rooted prejudices. Challenge your own biases and actively support equality. Reflect on moments where unconscious bias might have influenced your decisions. Third, community is power. Elijah found strength in collective action, illustrating the importance of connecting with others. Build meaningful relationships and offer support to those facing challenges. When feeling overwhelmed, reach out for help. You're not alone. Fourth, insufficient verdicts aren't endings. While the legal outcome felt unjust, it ignited a lasting commitment to change. View setbacks as learning opportunities and persist in your pursuit of what's right. When faced with disappointment, focus on what you can control and continue striving for progress. Remember that acting with courage will help in building a better future. Apply these lessons with intention, and you will see positive changes emerge and allow you to live a fulfilling life.